go here? There we go. Same thing as before, right? So make sure your code is documented correctly. So description of each class, Java doc method implementation at the interface level is fine, and then inline comments where necessary, right? So like in this example, what I've done is a little overkill, right? So this dot size is equal to size. Set the size. That's a little overzealous, right? We don't need to be commented that much. But for things like, let's say right here, a comment would have been good here. So where we're actually doing hashing, that's where we would want to. I don't know if you guys can even see that, but in this hash function where we, let me zoom in a little bit. Oh, of course, Word doesn't have the easy zoom capability. 200. Okay. So yeah, like in this hash function, this is where we would I'd want to see a comment, right? So like this line, what is it doing? Why is it doing what it's doing? So things like that. And then obviously make sure all unit tests are passing and make sure you're commenting your code regularly, that I have access to your Git repository. Same thing as before, when you do your submission, you don't even have to give me the link. I've already got the links. I just need the commit hash. So, because I have a script that has already gone through and pulled it. Literally all my script does is goes into each of your projects. I create a data file with the commit hash, and then it just does a git check out of the hash. So, as far as the grading breakdown goes, a little bit different than last time. Like I said, the UI piece is only worth 15 points. So if you guys are feeling lazy and can do the rest of it, you're only out 15 points if you don't do the UI. The service layer, which is our integration, well, it's kind of our integration with Hibernate, but it's also our scheduling and our API calls. That's worth 40 points. Keep in mind the biggest thing that a lot of people last time did this part right. They just didn't do the interfaces, right? So think about this. There are, what is this? Say six. Yeah, let's say 6 sub CTQs of service that we need to do, right? So all of this here, and then updating your existing and adding the unit test. So what's 6 divided by 40? Like 6.5, right? Something like that. 7? No, that's not right. Anyway, like 6. It's a fraction, right? But so if you don't do 2 pieces of that, you're knocked off 12 points. And like I said, that's how I did the grading on the first assignment. That's how I'll do the grading on the second one. So as long as you guys do all of that, it should be really easy to get full credit. You know, your implementation, what it does isn't that important. Does it work? You know, it doesn't have to be super complicated, right? You don't need to hit Facebook and do OAuth and build it out for mobile and all that. I just need an HTTP request, pull data down, process it, put it in the database. And then unit tests and interfaces. That's the full 40 points. Same with DAO. DAO is worth 30 points this time, and then the miscellaneous. And this is really just to try to get you guys to comment more. It's worth 15 this time instead of 10. So, comment is really the miscellaneous piece. It's code commenting. So comment the crap out of it, you'll get all 15. So, I think the class average on the last assignment was like 90.5, 91. Let's see if we can get that up to like a 95. All that to be said, I will not be offering extra credit for this assignment. So, I offered a lot of it last time. I think because I feel like there's a lot more work here than there was last time. To do the extra credit, I would be concerned that people would get too caught up in doing the extra credit work to actually do the full stack of what the assignment is asking you to do. So that is individual programming assignment number 2. Any questions? Okay, and like I said, this is due the 3rd of November, so I believe that's a Friday. So it gives you about a full month. So now let's go over the quiz really quick. And I think today we'll actually just go over the job scheduling and installing Quartz and getting that all configured. And then next Tuesday we'll go over the HTTP requests. I kind of anticipated going over the Quartz stuff Tuesday, but since we are on reading days, it threw my schedule off a little bit. But again, we're so far ahead of what we probably were on schedule to do that we could take a day and be a little behind. So I had to put in learning modules, HQL, quiz 2. All right. Okay, so question 1, how do we map a Java property to a MySQL column? So, little example XML. Hopefully everybody answered this guy right here, which is property, give the name of the property, so that's the property, that's the member variable of the class, of the ORM class. We specify the type it is, and then we map that to a column, giving the column name, the length, so like if it's a string, or a varchar, give it the length of the varchar, and then the not null and unique. Now watch, I'll get that one wrong. Okay, so second question. We do not need to install any other dependencies to configure Hibernate with Maven. That is false. We have to install, if we're doing MySQL, we have to install MySQL libraries. We have to install some additional third-party libraries that Hibernate requires. So we can't just say, hey Maven, get me Hibernate. Everything comes in one package. Third question, select all the files we need to properly configure Hibernate to query a database. So really, we need a Hibernate configuration XML file, we need a Hibernate model for said class, and we need a DTO class. We did not need a user or we did not need a DAO class, and the reason being, right, so although in our example we're using DAO classes, we don't have to use DAO classes to query the database, right? If I was a really crappy developer, I could put all of this on my managed beans, and I could query the database directly from my managed beans. So we need configuration file, model file, and a DTO or model class. And lastly, I have to specify a DDT, a document type definition that points to Hibernate in all of my Hibernate XML files. And the answer to that is true. If you guys remember from you know, I didn't put it in the syllabus. I should have said no electronic devices during class. The answer is true. I do have to for all my Hibernate XML files, I do have to specify DDT that points to Hibernate, right? So the example of this, like if we go into our Hibernate configuration file, you see up here at the top where we specify a doc type, and it points back to Hibernate. That's it. So actually, some of you guys may remember we ran into an issue with that in class where my doc type wasn't specified, so we weren't able to pull data from our database using Hibernate. So that being said, let's see. Yep, so pretty easy. Any questions about the quiz? Other questions on the quiz? No. I thought I pulled those out. That is strictly a Brandon Jones thing. Quiz question suggestions.
A lot of this stuff. You get extra credit.
What was that?
You get extra credit.
How many times have you done them?
One time was it was due last Friday.
Yeah, that's my bad, guys. If you really want, I can give like a point.
Yeah, that's better than nothing.
I can give like a point if you already did it. Okay, I can give the couple people a point because that's you know
Other people for knowing better.
that's a good point. I could give everybody a point, or I could give nobody a point. Yeah. You know, you guys should all have fairly decent grades in this class, I believe. So what's 1 point? What's 1 point on your last assignment?
Something I didn't go and waste time.
Is it? Is it? I don't think there was anybody I don't think there's a single person in this class that had a 69 on assignment 1. That the 1 point would bump them from a D to a C minus. Now, I could be wrong. I could be remembering incorrectly, but yeah, no. I mean, if you did it, I can give you a point for because that's my bad. I should have pulled that out. Yeah, I think I've said this before. So I just copied Brandon's entire content for this course, just because I didn't even have a badge for UC until the first week of class. So I said, screw it, just copy his stuff and go from there. Anyway, so let's jump into the content. For those of you guys that want to do it on your own, so again, MK Young has a really good example, JSF2 and Quartz 2. So this pretty much covers exactly what I'm going to go over in class. Super easy to set up. So if you guys want to use it, just this tutorial was great, or is great. So as far as adding our, well, let's take a step back. So what is Quartz? Like I said, Quartz is a scheduling framework, kind of like cron for Java applications, right? And we can use it in JSF, we can use it in desktop Java, we can use it in Java EE, we can use it in Spring. This allows us to run, for example, API calls in the background, right? So say every 5 minutes, I want to refresh my data store with external data. Using Quartz, I can schedule that. Yes. Am I what? Yes. So, using Quartz, in fact, we can confirm that I'm recording right here. Cool. So using Quartz, I can schedule API calls every 5 minutes, every minute. I can have update queries ran. I can have logs moved. Like if I have an application that's writing a ton of logs and I want everything, every user action, every method call to be logged, I can move my logs. So like a good example of this would be, say I have this running on a very small AWS instance, right? It's a super small AWS instance. I've got like 3 gigs of storage. Well, if it's writing a lot of logs, that's going to fill up really quick. So I could configure Quartz to upload my old log files to AWS S3, which is just a storage container. That way, I never run out of storage, but I'm always retaining my logs, right? So in 5-minute increments or hourly increments, I could run Quartz to have it do that for me. That's more of a maintenance thing. So what we want to use it for is similar to what we would use threading in Android for. You guys have all taken Android, right? Yeah, so in Android, when we want to make a network call, we have to start a separate process. Or not a separate process, that's Python. We have to spawn a separate thread. So, like I said, in JSF, since it's Java EE, we don't want to spawn a separate thread. There's some architecture restrictions around that. Part of that being, right, so if I spawn a separate thread in JSF, the back end of JSF is managing my threading, right? So basically, every time a user is connecting to my Java EE application, I believe a new thread is being spawned. So if I, inside of that thread, spawn a new thread that's waiting on something, right? So say I get caught up in thread deadlock. You guys are familiar with threading concepts, right? So say I have a thread managing one user login, and that thread spawns another thread that ends up deadlocking with my user login, right? So those two are sitting there idly. Well, that's going to zap all of the CPU from the box that I'm on, which means all of my other users are going to have a bad experience, right? This isn't like a standalone Java app where, okay, so all of my, say I run into something like that and my CPU gets zapped. It only affects me. Well, if I do it in a Java EE, or I'm sorry, a JSF app, it could affect 100,000 people at once, right? Think about like Blackboard. I believe Blackboard, or I guess Canopy's JSF, right? Or is it JSP? No, the old Blackboard was JSP, not Spotify. Oh, did they change it? Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I know. Okay, say this is a JSF app for fun. So imagine if I sucked all the CPU from Canopy. Think about how many students right now are logged into Canopy. I'm logged into Canopy, but if I have one bad thread that's sucked all my CPU, if I try to come over here and say give the couple people that did quiz question suggestions a point back, I can't do that because a bad thread or a deadlock or even just a thread that's waiting, right, is sucked all my CPU or all my processing ability, and I can't do anything. This is where things like Quartz come into play. So, in order to configure Quartz, obviously we're going to need to make a change and add some dependencies to our POM XML file. The changes that we have to make to the POM are super easy. First, we grab the Quartz scheduler framework, and that's just org.quartz-scheduler, artifact ID of Quartz, and just version 2.15. Excuse me, you can get a different version if you want. I'm just using 2.15. And then you'll also need to get the JavaX transaction framework as well. So, two simple dependencies. You guys can, when the code is up in GitHub, you can just pull it down and grab it from there if you want. So, super easy. However, there are a couple other things that we're going to need to do before we can actually start scheduling jobs. So, the first one is going to be let me see. Yeah, so we have to configure a quartz.properties file. This file lives inside of the resources directory at the top level, right? So inside of source main, we have a resources directory that is separate from the resources directory in web app. So we put a quartz.properties file here, and we're going to do a couple things in this file, right? First one, we're going to give our Quartz scheduler an instance name, right? So I had it called my scheduler. We'll call it my awesome scheduler. My thread pool is set to 3. That should be fine. I'm not doing a lot with this, right? So just 3 is fine. I then specify a job store class, and just org quartz simple RAM job store is fine. So the same thing with my job initializer class, file name class. Well, so job initializer class, just use the default. Couple things that we do want to tweak. So this org.quartz.plugin.jobinitializer.filenames, we want to specify quartz-config.xml. Now we can change that to whatever we want to call it. We can call it jobs.xml, whatever you want to call it. Just make sure that that file lives inside of your resources directory. And then we want to specify fail on file not found equals true, right? So if we go into our Quartz config, we have, if I can, let's do this. We have a parent node called job scheduling data. And inside of that, I have schedule nodes, right? And each one of these schedule nodes specifies essentially a specific job and job schedule, right? So you guys all know crons, right? So cron jobs. So really, you don't know cron jobs? Are you being sarcastic, or are you actually? Okay. So a cron job is primarily a Unix thing, although it doesn't live on OS X, surprisingly. Even though OS X is a Nix extension, well, OS X is built on Darwin, which is a flavor of Unix, right? It steals things from Unix, but it's not exactly Unix, which is why I get certain things, like I get like curl, and I get vim, and I get Emacs, God forbid, but I don't get things like cron. So what cron does is basically you have what's known as a cron tab file. Now, cron tab file takes multiple lines that you give it a string format, kind of like this, that says run, that you can decode this and identify, okay, this is how often I want to run this job, right? So cron tab, you specify a cron expression which says we're going to run the next part of this line every X amount of time. So the next part of that line is a script to run, right? So on a Unix system, I can say, all right, once a night, to clear out my logs, right? So I can say every 24 hours, delete, every 24 hours do an rm-rf of etc nginx logs, or what, var log nginx error log, right?
That makes sense, yeah.
So same thing's happening in Quartz, only we're using a slightly different cron expression, and we are specifying a Java job being a job written in Java. So we specify a trigger, and we can have different kinds of triggers, but really the only one we care about, at least in the context of what we're trying to do, is the cron trigger, which is exactly what I just talked about. So I give it a name. I can call it whatever I want to. We'll say scheduler job cron name, and we give it a name. We'll say scheduler cron. We give it a job group, and then we give it a cron expression. So then up here, so we've specified our trigger, which is a cron, and a trigger is just what causes this job to run, right? So we're using cron, and we're having it run every 5 seconds. So above that, I then want to specify what job is actually going to run every 5 seconds, or what job is going to run when this happens, or when that happens. That's where I specify my job, and I give it a name. So I'll say scheduler job, give it a group, the group is fine, description, print a welcome message. So I specify a name, a group, a description, and then I specify a job class. And this is where we point Quartz back to the class that's actually going to run our job, right? So this could be whatever I want to call it. This could be wherever I want to put it inside of my Java app. but in my case, I put it in COM IT45, RT4045 job, scheduler job. So if we go and dive into the location of that, and side note, so that's all that we need to do to configure Quartz from a configuration perspective. So now we have to go in and actually write the job. So I've already created a package called jobs. And I'm going to store all of my requesting jobs, all of my scheduled jobs, any of my jobs in here, right? So I have an HTTP runner job, and I have a scheduler job. So first, I'm going to go ahead and refactor this. Runner job. And so a couple things need to happen in order to make this runnable with Quartz. So the first one is, any class that we're going to run as a job needs to implement the job class in Quartz. So we'd say public class HTTP runner job implements job. So then we'll only have one method to override, and that's going to be the execute method. And this is really similar to when we're doing threading, how we'll implement runnable and then override the run method, right? Run method? It's been a long time since I've done multi-threading in Java. Yeah, it's the run method. Yeah, it's the run method. So it's very similar to implementing runnable and then overriding the run method. And inside of the run method, or in our case, the execute method, we're going to put what we want to happen when this job actually runs. So for right now, I'm going to drop in, it also needs to throw a job execution exception. That just means if something went wrong, we can throw a job execution exception. So this is where I would put my network calls, or this is where I would put my database updates, or my log file moves, or my AWS calls, whatever you want to drop in there. So now I want to do something. So in this case, I am just going to say system.out println. What do we want to say here? Quartz job running. Okay, so my Quartz job is running. I've configured everything correctly. So some of you guys may have caught it. Now that I've made the change in HTTP runner job.java, what do I need to change in everything that we just went over in order to actually see this run? If we remember from how we configured Quartz, what do we need to tweak? The job class? Exactly. So we'll see. So we're pointing at the scheduler job. We need to point to HTTP runner job. So we save it, and now in order to get Quartz to start running, all we have to do is start our JSF app. Drop it in Tomcat. Okay, so it's firing up, and if we flip back here, if we disregard the exception that I got from login service, you can see every 5 seconds the Quartz job is running. Pretty simple, right? So now what we can do is come in the back end and wire this up to send an API call every X number of seconds, right? So say every 5 seconds. So let's go over the very basics of doing this. You guys may need to give me just a second to pull it up on my GitHub. see. Seriously. Actually, can I just make that public instead? Big impose. T now Android new setting new. All right, so let me pull up the code to do this here. Okay, so now we want to go in and pull data from an external API, right? So I know at the start of class I talked about pulling data from Craigslist. Craigslist, as it turns out, does not actually have an open source API. I do have a way to, I mean, hypothetically, I can parse the HTML that I get back from Craigslist and get whatever data I want from it, right? That being said, handling HTTP, or not HTTP, handling HTML in Java is a huge annoyance, right? You guys remember the issues we ran into handling XML. Think about HTTP. Or not, I keep saying HTTP instead of HTML. Think about handling HTML instead of XML. Huge, huge pain, right? So in our example, let's just like hit underground, right? So weather underground. That's not what I want. I want API. Weather underground. Oh yeah, Wonderground. Let's see. What's a somebody give me an easy API, right? Do I have to sign up for it? What was that? Okay, let's do Yelp. All right, Yelp API. Do I have to sign up for it and create an account? Sign up. That's what I was wanting. Was just it. Is it Mashape? Let's see. So I do have to do auth in with the Yelp. Do an OAuth. You really do. You really do have to do OAuth for most stuff. But I really don't want to get into OAuth today because it's kind of a pain. I'd rather get into that next week. I'd rather do a basic call today so we code up the.
Does it matter what it is?
No.
Okay, well, there's always the fake things. Fake sound placeholder.
Okay, so
Fake
what's.
data you get. Just type in fake data API. So those ones you don't ever have to do. Yeah, it's just a problem.
There's a Star Wars API and a Pokemon
What's the Star Wars API?
Swappy.co. It's I.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well, it's one T.
Damn it.
There it is.
All right. That's assuming it's going to work for me. All right, there we go. Okay, so API people 1. All right, nice. Very nice. Great success. All right. So we've created, we have an API now. We've created a runner job. We have, what do we have left? Well, now we have to fill out our API calls themselves, right? So I've already created, over the weekend, I went ahead and I already created a network HTTP class and it's implementing, or a network HTTP interface and it's implementing class. So we have, if we go into the class itself, we have send get request, we have overloaded send get and send post requests. So one of them takes parameters, one of them takes parameters with a string API key, but let's add one more method to this that literally just takes a URI. The simplest of all the methods. Okay, so in order to send an API request in Java, there are a couple of very simple things we need to do. So the first is we need to create an object of type HTTP client. Close. See, hang on, we may need to pull a dependency here. Okay, so we need to add a one Maven dependency here to do this, and this is, so it's org Apache HTTP components, and basically this just gets us the HTTP libraries for Java that the Apache folks have put out. So way easier to use than doing something else. So now that that's there, will it give me org Apache client? There we go. No, I don't want to do that. I want to do default HTTP client. Okay, so I create a new client, and that's it's deprecated. I don't care that it's deprecated. Quit striking it through. So we've created an HTTP client. So now we have to create an HTTP GET object, right? Really? Equals new HTTP. And in the constructor of the HTTP GET, we pass in our UAI. Not UAI, URI. Totally different thing. So that's easy enough, but now we have to create a response handler. handler So I create a new response handler. That's not what I want. No, 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 I don't want that. I want import org.apache http .iml import dot client dot, well, that's there. It's an abstract response handler now. Okay, so we create a response handler, and then we'll say return string equals client dot execute, and we'll pass in the HTTP GET and the response handler. Add exceptions to the our exception to the method signature, and then return the return string. So that, at its very simplest, is how we would construct an API call or a network call. If I were to delete that line right there. Okay. So what needs to happen now? Well, now I need to go into my HTTP runner job and actually fire the job up to the swappy.co API. So I will say string URI equals, what's the URI on this guy? https swappy.co/API. And then /people/1. And then I will say system.out.println. We'll also say HTTP equals new network HTTP.
The moment you realize you're lucky your backyard is in the back.
And those will help you find the lawnmower that's perfect for you.
Nice. Startled me for a second. I'm like, who's got a lawnmower in here? Yeah, that's super annoying. So we'll say HTTP, which is our network HTTP variable. We'll say send get request and pass in the URI that points to swappy.co, and we will surround with try catch just in case something happens. What? All right, cool. I didn't break it. All right. So now that that's all done, assuming everything is wired up correctly and assuming we didn't screw anything up, this should send an API request to swappy.co every 5 seconds. So we'll drop a breakpoint here, and we will fire it up. Okay, so we've hit our breakpoint. The URI is right. So then we'll step into this guy, into our send get request. So our client worked correctly, our HTTP GET variable created correctly, our response handle created correctly. So last but not least, we need to execute the API call. So now we have a return string, which is the JSON that we got back from our API. Now, obviously, for your assignment, you want to actually parse it and do something with it. But for our example, I don't really care. I just want to see it. So if I go to over here, you can see now I'm outputting my API data. Whoop. Oh. So my Quartz job is running. I'm fetching my data. I'm assuming height is in centimeters. Okay. That makes sense. You know, when I was a kid, I was really into Star Wars, and I got made fun of for it a lot. So no, I liked it quite a bit. Then the Big Bang Theory came out, and now everybody loves Star Wars. So, what was that? I watch it a lot. I enjoy it. I find it's something stupid I can turn my brain off and enjoy. It's better than like Family Guy or whatever, but Family Guy, man, it's just.
You don't like the central filing formula for success?
You mean 20-second cutaways about random celebrities?
27 cutaways, talking things, not a person, so a goldfish,
I do like American Dad. American Dad is. Yeah. It does still have the formula, but I feel like there's no cutaways. I feel like Family Guy takes a lot of pot shots at just random celebrities, right? Just random things that are in the news or random viral videos. It's like, dude, write some original content. It's like the one time I had dinner with Rosie O'Donnell. Okay, cool. No plot. At least American Dad has some plot. Anyway, where was I going with this? Yeah, so Big Bang Theory. It's a funny show. I enjoy some things in it. It's ruined a lot of things, like that whole comic book culture, and like you see people in Batman stuff all the time now. Big Bang Theory came out in what, 2008? 2007? I think it was like 2008. Let's see, started in 2007. Yeah, so before 2007, that like the comic book T-shirts and Star Wars T-shirts and Star Trek and all that, it was part of nerd culture. And now you see everybody wearing that stuff, and everybody's now into comic books, and everybody's into Star Trek and Star Wars. So they've ruined a lot of things like that. So anyway, So Star Wars, still like it. It's been ruined for me though. But I watched the what was the one that came out like 2 years ago? Rogue One. Was it Rogue One?
Rogue One was not like a continuation of the story. That was like filling in.
What was episode 7 then? What was the name? The Force Awakens. So I watched The Force Awakens. Hated it. I hated The Force Awakens. Disney owns them now. I probably won't watch another one.
At least watch the main episode. I haven't seen Rogue One yet.
I really don't watch a lot of movies. The other night we watched the newest installment of The Nightmare on Elm Street. It was actually pretty interesting. We did go to see the new Annabelle over Labor Day weekend.
I just heard you don't see a lot of movies, but you just named 2 movies and like that's way too much.
Okay, I know people that watch movies like every weekend.
Oh, that's
Like,
I can't pay attention.
And that's my thing. I'm like, I'm breaking out my laptop 10 minutes in. I'm like, okay, is it commercial break yet? Anyway, off of the tangent. So that's how we make a network request. That's how we make a very, very basic API request. And then schedule it inside of a job scheduler. So we don't have to do it inside of job scheduler, right? We can just, inside of our service class, we could send off an API request. And maybe in some cases that's applicable, right? Let's assume that our website has a login with Facebook button. So to log in with Facebook, we have to send an OAuth request and get a session token and do all of this crazy, annoying crap. Because Facebook is evil. But it maybe in that case we want to do network requests inside of our service class. But in a case like this where we just want to update our backend data, we just run it as a schedule and have it update periodically. So, any questions? Okay. So next week we will go over more advanced network calls. So next week we'll go over, we actually will do either a Facebook or a Twitter OAuth login, or maybe a Spotify OAuth login. So we'll get into how to set up your request headers and how to do, not single, I guess it's technically single sign-on, but like OAuth sign-ons, and then how to parse some of the data and load it into our database. Don't know about the week after that. I think once we turn in assignment 2, we will jump into Python. So, well, probably Django. So, because Django has a much stronger built-in ORM faculty than Flask does. Because Flask, I mean, it's great. It's great for fast and dirty stuff. But the problem with Flask is that it doesn't have built-in ORM, and you have to use SQL Alchemy. It's an ORM framework, which is great. I use SQL Alchemy every time I code for work, but you have to wire a lot of stuff up. Whereas with Django, you just plug and play. So, so I'm going to upload this code to GitHub. I'm going to upload the video to YouTube. And then if you guys have any questions over the weekend, please email me. And if not, we'll see you Tuesday.